Are we overreacting to Nick Mullens' 4-interception performance against the Lions, or should he actually be benched for Jaren Hall? Let's get into it and all the rest of your questions on Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. If you are new to the Locked On Vikings podcast, what is going on? My name is Luke Braun. I will be your host, and it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is an audio listening place like SiriusXM or anywhere else you listen to your favorite shows. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Thank you so much to those of you who listen to this show every single day. My hashtag every day is you guys are the bedrock of this show. Cannot tell you how much I appreciate you, especially on this, which is the last Twitter Tuesday of the 2023 calendar year. Twitter Tuesday is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is a great place to find last-minute tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, Locked On NFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today on the show is Twitter Tuesday, so if you have questions for me, you can always send them to me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings. You can fill out the Google form in the show notes or send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. Because I'm on a bit of an improvised setup on a tiny little laptop, I don't have all of it in front of me. So I just got like Twitter open. So I'm just going to read them off. And the first one is one that is full of this question's everywhere this season. I got this question a ton during the game, after the game, and when I put out this call for Twitter Tuesday questions. But my favorite iteration of it comes from Not a Sports Fan, who says, am I wrong for really liking a lot of what Mullens did? Obviously, you can't throw 4 picks, but it seems like his desire to always push the ball downfield and give his guys a chance is exactly what KOC wants in a guy. And if Mullens was 40% better, he would be perfect. So to that last part, yeah, if he was better, he would be better. That's the logic's a bit circular there. But okay, so I definitely see what you're getting at, right? The ball was a little bit better at being on time. Not on the interceptions. He wasn't consistent about it, but he could like do it at all, which puts him above Josh Dobbs for me. And a lot of people asked a version of the same question, which was like, okay, so is that enough to get him benched? Are we going to see Jaren Hall? Personally, I don't think we're going to see Jaren Hall. I do not think that, I mean, 4 interceptions on its own and a much worse offensive output against the Bears, and then a whole bye week to like marinate in that was not enough for Kevin O'Connell to bench Josh Dobbs, who had all kinds of other things working against him that would have made for a perfectly sensible benching anyways. Like, it made a lot more sense to bench Dobbs after his 4 interception game than it does to bench Mullens after his, in my opinion, at least, because Mullens did have camp with the team. So the idea that you're going to have to improvise with the playbook all the time, and therefore maybe you should go away from, like, that logic is logic that really spurred me to say, hey, maybe we should let Josh Dobbs like chill a little bit, and not rely on him and not have to live like this because we don't have to. Well, with Nick Mullens, you don't have that problem also compounding things, right? And also the offense is just better with Nick Mullens. It just moves better. Like he's better. He's better at getting the football into the hands of his guys. He has Justin Jefferson. Josh Dobbs only did for 1 game. Immediately threw a hospital ball and got him hurt. So maybe that's a little bit maybe that's a little bit less of a strong point. But I think what Not a Sports Fan is saying here, the fact that Nick Mullens is aggressive and Kevin O'Connell's going to love that, means I don't think he gets benched. I've been calling for Jaren Hall, but I do so with humility. All right. I get it. And I get that the Vikings are going to be patient. I'm not going to freak out over it like a lot of people are. I don't think it's insane to keep Mullens in or anything like that. But I would love to see Jaren Hall for the last part of the season. But if they don't think Jaren Hall is better than Nick Mullens, and hey, based on training camp, they do not. Like, if they did, they would already have him over Mullens on the depth chart. They would not say, yeah, we think Jaren Hall is better, but we're going to start Nick Mullens. That is not a logic. Because they are starting Nick Mullens, we necessarily know that they think Mullens is better. I don't think their mind's going to change on that after a 4 interception game, because it already hasn't. Like, that's kind of going to tell us where to go. Now, if we have a short leash maybe against the Packers, and if he throws 2 interceptions and he gets benched at halftime, hey, that is kind of the way that they approach things with Dobbs as well. So I could see them kind of doing the same thing there. I would love to see a little bit of Jaren Hall. Maybe if they're, eliminated, they go in and throw him out there, kind of give him some tread on his tires. That would be kind of fun. JJ asks, what improvement can Mullens gain starting the last couple of games instead of Hall? And if none, why not have Hall start? So I don't think this is the right way to go about it. They want to win games, right? Now, personally, I don't see the Vikings going 2-0 to end the season and then making the playoffs or whatever. But I don't have to. The Vikings have to see themselves doing that. They have to believe that they can. That's just, it's survival in the NFL. The second you don't believe that you can, you might as well go home. So they are going to start the quarterback that they think gives them the best chance to win. They think it's Mullens. If you disagree, that's valid, but they are going to do that, and they're going to do so with conviction. I don't see either of those guys. I don't see 2 games doing a lot for either of those guys in their development, to be honest with you. A little bit of tread on Jaren Hall's tires. If it's free, sure, why not? Right. That would be great. You might something that I think carries a lot of stakes. So I don't think that, I don't think looking at this as who develops more is the right way to look at it. But yeah, sure, if you really wanted to look at it that way, yeah, the rookie has more room to develop than the guy who's been in the league doing this the same way for a long time. Of course, Mullens is always going to play hero ball. We're just going to put up with that. Joe Renton says, can you give us your top 3 priorities for the offseason? So priority is an interesting word because what is the most important thing is going to be different than what order things actually happen in. This happens every offseason. Look out for it. Watch for it. All right. And then come back to the show and tell me I was right. Every year there is, your big priority. For me, top priority is figure out quarterback, whether that's getting Kirk Cousins or not, make your decision on that, but figure out quarterback. Your next priority is get Justin Jefferson extended. Or maybe we can lump Justin Jefferson and Danielle Hunter and say, get key players extended. That's your next priority. And then the third priority would be do well in the draft. The draft has to be part of the priority thing as well, right? There's a lot of leverage on that. But if you're not talking about draft, because obviously nobody says we'll do poorly in the draft this year, right? If you don't want to do that, then I would say the next priority would be, I would say adding pass rush juice. And I don't care if that's an edge rusher or a tackle or a linebacker that plays edge rusher sometimes, or a chess piece player or a blitzing safety. We need pass rush juice because we can't win one-on-ones without pressure being manufactured by Brian Flores right now, and that was what happened against Cincinnati. So yeah, that needs to change. But so there's my 3 priorities, right? But that's not going to happen in those orders, right? They're gonna re-sign Brandon Powell or something first, which I would actually dig. But because that's easy. Right. That's when you get the random kind of 1-year depth guys that show in. They're not saying we think Brandon Powell is more important than our quarterback situation. And I think if you genuinely think that that's an opinion anyone in the Vikings holds, I think you got to look in the mirror and ask yourself why you're not giving them more credit. But it's because it's so easy, you might as well get it done. And they already know what they are planning to spend on Kirk Cousins. So they already know whether or not they can afford Brandon Powell. So signing Brandon Powell is not going to be, oh my God, they signed Brandon Powell before they signed Justin Jefferson. They're not prioritizing Brandon Powell over Justin Jefferson. They just know that they're going to have that money left over and he wants to sign it. And it's, why wait? Just get it done because it's easy to get done. And there's less negotiation to do with that. It's going to take less time than Justin Jefferson, who's probably going to want to haggle a little bit, right? That's all fine. So what happens first will not be the priority. That's the point, I guess, that I want to make. Similarly, Chuck the Bowler asks, is there any world Kwesi doesn't sign JJ or whatever the F he wants this offseason? Man, is there a world? I guess, right? We don't know Kwesi that well. Maybe he does. I think that would be colossally stupid. I think a world where the Vikings do not sign Justin Jefferson and do not have a serious quarterback is a world that feels like the worst possible situation. I don't know what is worth that for Kwesi, right? What would you, to what end, for what? And so I don't know him that well. So maybe he would have some other grandmaster plan that he feels is more valuable than Justin Jefferson, but I just can't really even think of what that would be. Giving him the most benefit of the doubt possible. What could be better than Justin Jefferson? You see that guy play? What could be better? So I would be stunned. Now, do they maybe let him play on his 5th-year option and then negotiate under the threat of the franchise tag and see if they can get more money that way? Maybe. That kind of hardball, I think, in the long run, though, does not make for a successful NFL culture, if you ask me. I've got a whole bunch more questions to get through here, so I'm just going to keep on scrolling this old Twitter thread and answer your stuff. So we got a lot left to do. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. Very interesting stuff going on in FanDuel. If you want to hit those MVP bets, might be a little late to get value on Lamar Jackson, who just went off on the 49ers. He is now at minus 180. He's the front runner. Brock Purdy falls all the way down to plus 1,900. So if you still believe Brock Purdy can win MVP after being benched, I don't, but if you do, you can get him at plus 1,900, or you can go in and get Josh Allen or Tua Tagovailoa if you want a spicy late December prop bet. You can also find all kinds of things like props, player props, spreads, over-unders, and of course money lines. And if you are new to FanDuel, you can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make a $5 money line bet on any money line you want. It can be a huge, overwhelming favorite, whoever that is. If that guy that wins, you get $150 back in bonus bets. That's 30-1 odds on an overwhelming favorite. You won't find odds like that anywhere else. You can find that at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sportsbook of the NFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day, including here over this holiday season. I hope y'all are having hope y'all had a lovely Christmas weekend, kind of long Christmas weekend. Hope you didn't have to go back to school or work too soon. Let's keep going with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. And there was one question I definitely wanted to answer. I don't remember who asked it. I will find it in a second, but they asked me for New Year's resolutions for the Minnesota Vikings. I think that's so cute. New Year's resolutions for the Minnesota Vikings. That came from, I'll find it. So my New Year's resolution, this is the last Twitter Tuesday before the new year. So I figured what a great time to say what the New Year's resolutions for the Vikings are. And I think that the important thing that the Vikings have to focus on for me is getting better pass rush. But New Year's resolutions to me are more vibes based. That's what I do, right? Like my New Year's resolution this year was that I wanted to be a more regular cook, a more regular home. I wanted to get into the habit of cooking for myself every night instead of ordering out or whatever, save money, be healthier. But I wanted to just, I wanted to say, I feel like a more regular cook. That's not, I don't do the like smart goal thing where it has to be like this measurable deal. I cook 3 times a week or anything like that. Ed Helinski, that's who asked this question. Thank you, Ed. And I think for the Vikings, it's to remove the stupid stuff. It's the way I talk about it with my dad, the stupid crap. That is stuff like your headset went out and you couldn't get the play in a crucial spot in a tight game against the Chargers. Stuff like back-to-back false starts, which happened against the Lions here. You can't do anything about your quarterback tearing his Achilles, and it gives a lot of leeway for that will excuse a lot of failures. Like 4 interceptions, yeah, that's not on Kwesi, man. Your quarterback got hurt. Like you did the best you could with the resources available. Like it's fine. But what is on, I think, the organization, I think a big one is the turf. The turf caused a lot of issues, a lot of slippage. Guys were slipping in that Lions game. Guys are slipping all the time on your own home turf. To me, that's embarrassing more than it is just like a thing, but like, get rid of that crap. It's free to fix that, right? It's free to fix the disaster fumble Ruski nonsense thing on a 3rd and 1 play where you called a trick play, right? It's free to avoid a stupid 15-yard penalty after what would have been like a 6-yard gain on 1st down. That's the kind of stuff that's free. It doesn't cost any cap space or draft picks to fix that. It's just discipline. So maybe get disciplined. That might be a better way. And that's on the sideline too, getting your play in late and then you're at the, stuck at the line of scrimmage and the play is too late. You get delay of games or you need to call timeouts or the other team can time the snap count. That happened to the Vikings a bunch versus the Bengals. I'm sure you would see it a bunch on the Lions. I wasn't really paying too much attention to the play clock, but that would be it. Get rid of the stupid stuff. That's my New Year's resolution for the Vikings. Somebody else asked, I got to find it again, it was from Troy Boy, who asks, what happens to Kirk's void years cap hit if he resigns? What a great question. If you go to patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL and you click on the Football 201 category, the collection, that has three videos that I am unbelievably proud of. It has my Brian Flores tutorial, has my pass protection tutorial, and then the third one is pursuant to your question, which is the one that says let's count beans. It's all about the cap and it explains all of this stuff, but I'll give you a quick rundown. Let's say that I sign a 1-year deal for $8. Let's keep the numbers very nice and small, and I'm probably only worth $8 anyways. So 1-year deal for $8, but let's say that you don't have $8 in cap space and you need to get that down. You would add void years and convert some of that to signing bonus, which would spread that money through those void years. So those void years are fake years. The contract has a scheduled date where that player is going to be released. So I forget the date off the top of my head, but there's a date where Kirk Cousins is going to be cut by the Vikings, released by the Vikings. And if nothing happens, that date will pass. The contract void out, the void will trigger, and Kirk Cousins will become a free agent. And all of the dead cap, which is all of the money that was converted into signing bonus and spread out into future years, will then be due against the cap immediately. The Vikings will have to take that as a salary cap charge. If he re-signs, that void won't happen, and that acceleration won't happen. So that money will stay spread out. I believe it's $28 million would be the dead cap hit if he signs. If he does not sign, if he does sign, there will be a $10 million signing bonus charge that's already part of his contract that will be tacked on to whatever new money he gets. So let's say he gets $20 million, it'd be a $30 million cap hit. And then $18.5 million will then hit the Vikings books, but not until 2025, which feels better than $28 million, right? So it keeps it spread out a little bit more and allows you to kind of take all of that extra guarantees and get out from under the Spielman contracts a little bit. Yoink, gimme dat says, is the Hall situation like the Mond situation where the fans wanted to see him play, but the coaching staff didn't because they knew he wasn't good/ready? So I don't think Hall is as bad as Kellen Mond was. I think right now, blow for blow, I'm taking Jaren Hall over Kellen Mond 1,000,000%. Just based off of what we saw in like preseason and/or camp. But I do think that, yeah, the fans want to see him because he is an unknown, right? And a question mark feels better than 4 interceptions. And I think it's really difficult. I mean, how many times do you always hear, how it can't possibly get worse, can it? Do not challenge them. It can absolutely get worse. And that's their opinion, right? That they think it'll get worse. Now, it is valid to say, no, I think Jaren Hall is better than Nick Mullens. But I think the take has to be, I have seen what Jaren Hall has done. I've seen what Nick Mullens has done. And my opinion is that he is better. Right? It has to be that. And it can't be, well, Nick Mullens is so bad. This mystery thing surely must be better. That logic does not follow. And if it does, you haven't been watching the Vikings for long enough. The Weird Al of wrestling figures says, how do coaches strategize how much to show when playing a team 2 or maybe 3 times in a short span? Would they hold back on adjustments during the first game? On adjustments, I don't think so. I think you're just trying to win there, right? Especially if it's like division on the line. They feel like the stakes are high enough. But I would say you make that first game plan with the idea that you're going to subvert that in the next game. Because you get to show them something, right? You get to show them a look. And then the next game, you show them a different look. So both teams are going to do some of that stuff, and they're going to look and watch the tape. You got to see if you showed all your staples against the Lions, which I think both the Vikings and Lions mostly lived in their staples. Most teams do. You saw all your staples, and you saw how they respond to all those staples. So now the second game gets to be, okay, how do we beat those responses? And the game is going to come down to who has a better answer to that question. Brian London, calling Sandinista, asks, do you think Madison is the starting running back next season? Competition, I got to say. I don't think so. I think Madison felt functionally benched. We'll really see on Sunday Night Football. It might have been a pitch count thing. But to me, you're either healthy enough to play or you're not. So it felt a little bit like a benching. And if Madison were the starter but on a pitch count, I think he would have been introduced at the stadium as the starter, but they said starting at running back 32 Ty Chandler's. I think Ty Chandler's the starter now. So that tells me that those two guys are going to, at the very least, be in an open competition. Maybe you cut Madison for like cap space or whatever, right? Like that could be something. I don't have his contract in front of me, but that's something to talk about. But I would say at the very least 50-50 competition, and then maybe you throw a third guy in there. And that guy's probably not Ken Nwangwu, who I think kind of sucks at running back. Both like logic, he must, because otherwise there's been too many opportunities to get him in there. But I would say the odds-on favorite would be like a draft pick. I would love a free agent. I would love to bring in like Tony Pollard, right? If the Cowboys don't bring him back, it kind of feels like they might not. He's on that franchise tag. Like, give me a free agent or a cool veteran, somebody that we know we can rely on to fill that hole. And I think because the running back market is so depressed, that guy won't break the bank too bad. And stop trying to like develop. Let me just get somebody who we know is awesome with the ball in his hands and can read stuff right. And then just move on and have this problem be solved. And I actually think the running back market might have become a market inefficiency because of how little running backs are getting paid nowadays. I have a whole bunch more questions, and I want to make sure that I get to them all. So let's try to finish this thing strong on Twitter Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. If you have tried to get to a Vikings game since, say, Halloween, or maybe you really liked that 49ers game and you tried to go buy tickets, they were probably marked up to heck, right? It's a nightmare to find tickets last minute to NFL games and to all sports games. And Gametime has that, as well as concerts, comedy shows, in theater, all that stuff. And you can find it all on the Gametime app. So go download the Gametime app today, and you can use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. They have their zone deals where you pick the section and Gametime picks the row for you, and you can get an average of 18% savings because they can use that flexibility to like find you really, really good deals, right? If you have a whole section to pick from. If you find the same section and same row for less, Gametime will also credit you 110% of the difference. They're that confident that they can get you the best deal in town. So go once again to the Gametime app, download it, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off at Gametime. Keeping it rolling here with this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. The next one I wanted to answer, fascinating idea, comes from Scott Graham, who says, thoughts on Bill Belichick becoming the Vikings DC. Can it happen? Okay, what a fascinating idea. It feels like such a pipe dream. I don't think so. I don't think Bill Belichick would take a DC job. I think if he wants to go back into coaching, someone will hire him as a head coach. He has enough of a reputation for that. The only way I see him taking a DC job is if he decides to, because of like the stress level of head coaching, and he decides, I'm old, I'll take a chill DC job. But if I'm wrong about that, and if because of how poorly this Patriots season has gone, Bill Belichick is too much of, is too radioactive to get a head coaching job or whatever, I could see, if he's going to pick a DC job, I could see it being the Vikings job. For one, Brian Flores is running 60% Belichick stuff. Belichick would come in. I would very much trust Belichick to like have the right ideas about defense, right? For two, he did trade for Kevin O'Connell once. Like they know each other. They have a relationship, a very good relationship. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that Kevin O'Connell still texts Bill Belichick and gets advice from him, like even in the middle of the season. So he says, I love the idea of Matt LaFleur prepping to play Belichick, knowing Belichick spent the whole week only thinking about defense. Yeah, and that might be something, like if he wants that, right? It is a fantastic fit to dream about, but I don't think that there is a world where Bill Belichick doesn't just take another head coaching job. Like he could go be the head coach of the Chargers instead. He won't take that over a DC job, even in a team he feels like he fits. Andrew Schaefer says, what exactly was Evans doing so badly that he got benched? Were the mistakes more so issues with scheme, technique, game plan, or something else? curious what the tape tells. Because of travel, I haven't been able to like watch the tape as closely as I usually would by this point in the week. But what I will say is from where I was sitting, dude missed a lot of tackles, man. He got juked by Jahmyr Gibbs. He got juked by, I think he got juked by Josh Reynolds once or something. Got juked by Amon-Ra St. Brown. You can't miss tackles and be on this team. If you want more, you can listen. I ranted really hard about that on yesterday's show. So you can go listen to that if you want. But this is a defense where tackling is everything. And if you miss tackles, you're getting pulled. But what I will say is I think there is a world where you can pull you can pull a player and say, look, it's not your day, but you're not fired from your job permanently, but we just got to shut you down today because you're just out of it. You're just off. And that's all right. And we'll go to the tape. We'll figure out why. We'll work on it. We'll get you back in there. But I would be pretty surprised with the season that Caleb Evans has had on the whole if we like suddenly see Andrew Booth starting or something like that. That would be interesting, especially considering we don't know if Byron Murphy's even going to play. So they might not even have the luxury of doing that. Bings asks, what is a bigger need in the draft? Drafting your future franchise QB and letting him sit behind Kirk, or do you go with the best defensive player on the board with it being an edge or a corner? Okay, so I'm not going to answer a lot of questions like this until we're like deep in draft season. We're talking after free agency, the first like couple days of free agency, that kind of big week, right? When you're like mid-March, late March. That's when I really start hitting the draft. My answer to this is always going to be boring. It's always going to be who's better. Who does better for your team? I think drafting your future QB, whether or not you have Kirk, is a great idea. But don't take a QB just to take a QB. That's how you get Christian Ponders, right? Take the best defensive player on the board. If the best defensive player on the board is Mike Hughes, maybe don't do that, right? Like, you got to hit on the pick. And ultimately, the way we will look back on drafts, we very rarely say, man, they took the wrong position. Right? When you say they picked Laquan Treadwell, who's the guy that we always talk about in that 2016 draft that the Vikings should have taken? It's not Will Hernandez anymore. It's Michael Thomas. They should have taken Michael Thomas. It's a different guy at the same position, right? It's really rare, I feel like, to look at it and say, well, gosh, they just didn't prioritize their roles correctly. No, if they whiffed on a pick, we're mad that dude is bad. But if Laquan Treadwell were Michael Thomas, we wouldn't talk about Will Hernandez at all. And that's the way we see these things in hindsight. Stampede asks, after seeing KOC with a few other QBs this season, can we draw conclusions about what style and qualities you'd like to see in our QB to fit the system? Or do you think KOC would be able to adjust with a full offseason install? Personally, I think we have seen KOC adjust his offense pretty hard to a bunch of different styles of QB, right? Like, being willing to install zone read on the fly in the middle of a week, because that's just what Josh Dobbs does well, tells me, even though that stuff didn't really work, it made the run game better, but he never kept it, and that's just because of the way the Raiders played it. The fact that he was willing to try that tells me, yeah, if you get Jaden Daniels, the offense is going to look different than if you pick like Michael Penix, right? It's just going to be different. So I do believe that Kevin O'Connell will adapt things. That said, there are certain things you cannot live without, right? You cannot live without good timing. So if I throw on tape and that dude's slow as heck, I'm saying he's not going to be a Viking. Because if you take forever to get rid of the ball, a lot of the concepts that these McVay style offenses really hang their hats on fall entirely apart. That timing needs to be very precise. So I'm looking for precise passing, which, like, I know that's a thing about Caleb Williams, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Caleb Williams go later in the draft than you think, because he holds on to the ball really, really long. Even though those college defenses couldn't punish him as much, and you got all kinds of cool highlights running around, I wouldn't be shocked to see that matter a little bit more than you think to NFL teams. Brian Scheel asks, are defensive special teams always instructed to be aware of the fake punt but occasionally fall asleep, typing the seconds after the Chiefs' fake punt? So the way I understand it with special teams, it goes a lot of different ways. Sometimes they will see a look on tape, and this goes for punt blocks or kick blocks, fakes, field goals and punts, all of that stuff. Sometimes they will see a look on tape and they will say, okay, this is how, like, let's say their punt block team likes to overload to one side. And you go, okay, if they overload to that side, alert it, and we're going to check into a fake punt that attacks the other side. And that was actually the Ty Chandler fake Was that the Bengals game that happened in? Or was that maybe the Bears game? I forget which game that was. But Ty Chandler had a big long run. I think it was the Bears game. Had a big long run on a fake punt. That was we saw a look and we were going to attack it as the second they put it out there. Sometimes it will be a little bit more improvisational where the punt team will try to punt block and they'll actually bring all their jammers to the inside. And they say, we're not going to jam the punt gunners at all. And we're going to try to punt block. And well, then suddenly you have an uncovered guy out there lining up at wide receiver. So we're going to throw to him. The Vikings caught the Saints on that on a fake punt last year in London. I remember that one. So I could see a lot of different ways to get to it. I do not believe it's often the defense just stopped paying attention. Like, it's not like, oh, they were snoozing and they were lazing through it. A lot of times it's that there is some sort of formational thing that they're taking advantage of. Or sometimes we're just going to be aggressive and try to catch them. And we're just going to try to do this and hope that it's a surprise. And for that reason, like Mike Zimmer always put the starters on punt defense teams, like all the starters out there. And he could just check into a defensive regular coverage and say, well, now your special teams is against my defense. You're never going to convert this. But to me, it's usually a little bit more purposeful and intentional than just, oops, they fell asleep and we got them. Like it is a little bit of got them, but it's we got them because we saw X go to place Y and we figured out that we could take advantage of that. You know, it's a little more schematic than that. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed. I got one more coming from this weird den that is my brother-in-law's basement, which is where I'm staying for Christmas, and then I'll be back at the at home at the normal setup. So if all that really bugs you, that'll be it's one more. I'll see if I can't watch a little tape for tomorrow. I'll see y'all for that. And as always, Skull.